say at the end of the day, I had to put in, actually the biggest struggle in terms of getting a visiting lecturer in isn't these people who come in to talk to you. They don't get paid, they come in of their own accord. And obviously Paul's done a working day, just like many of us have done a working day. However, the biggest struggle in introducing an external lecturer to you is you would not believe the paperwork, and I've got a civil engineering colleague up there who will nod and know this, the paperwork I have to go through to get this room for you in order to get Paul to present to you this evening. It took me the entirety of a working day to get this evening and 2 evenings in the next semester approved. I actually came to the conclusion that even if I said you would go to the Pope or Madonna, I wouldn't.
I love Madonna.
Well, we still wouldn't have got Madonna.
I'm so obsessed with Madonna.
And I was getting more and more aggrieved and frustrated. At one stage this week, they actually cancelled the room on me again, because that's what people do at this university. They like to make life a little bit difficult. However, it's equally quite embarrassing when you invite somebody in, you go through all the headache of booking the space, and there's only a handful of you there. And I'm well aware quite a number of your colleagues didn't attend the lecture today because they knew it was going on later than normal. Again, their loss. So,
You can tell them what they missed.
yes, and
There
my
might be
man
rude
up there,
words.
No, it's the same thing. Fun if they need to know what they miss.
this man's going to press play shortly. It's the silver button.
Yeah, I've got it.
So, fortunately, my rant wasn't on record, or was it?
Yeah.
It was on record.
My rant was on record?
Mhm.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. Maybe that's just the portion I'll put up on the Moodle site. So everybody hears
Trying to keep it
the rant.
original.
I'll just cut that and then they won't see the presentation. So, I'll take a deep breath, I'll pass the man to Paul, and to reiterate, Paul is very specifically going to be talking about stages 0 and 7.
Yeah. In context.
I'm going to go and sit up the top.
Okay.
Fun, my friend. Walk out halfway through, disrupt your rule.
Well, good evening. And thank you for those that have stayed. I hope this will be of interest to you. Why am I here? Well, as Christine said, she asked me to come and talk about a particular aspect of the plan of work. And that particular aspect is going to focus on stages 7 and stages 0. I know quite a bit about those stages, particularly stage 0, and in fact I was the reason that there was a stage 0. So if you open the plan of work document, you'll see my name in the rear of it, and it took a lot of effort to bring about the concept of a stage even called 0. It's deliberately called 0, and we'll find out why in a bit. What I want to try and talk through to you is what are stages 7 and 0. Oh, it says 1. There's a typo already, so that's meant to say 0. How 7 forms the circular process. You've all seen the logo. The logo is that way deliberately. It is a circular process. And how I think it is relevant to you and your careers. First and foremost, hopefully you're aware of these. This one that I co-authored. So this one is the one that covers stages, you maybe see on there, 7, 0 and 1. If they're not in the library here, they should be. You can buy all 3 at a reduced rate, but they are your overview guide to the Plan of Work 2013. And I will be lifting parts from this book in what I show you tonight. So, looking at those in context, you can see really, as you'd expect, the book that called Briefing. I think Briefing is probably the worst title. Blame the RIBA for that. I could rant a lot about the RIBA. I won't, but I could. But you'll also notice that 7 occurs over here as well. Again, that is because of the circular nature of the plan of work as it is now perceived. Now, you will see various variants of diagrams of this. Now this is all to do with levels of cost. Now, I don't think I have a pointer here, but going from cost of briefing through to cost in use to a client. Now, what I want to look at the context here is stages 7 and 0 and 1. Many people assume that stage 7 is all to do with this, the cost of maintenance, the limited view of FN, if you like. Fact of the matter is, this is stage 7. This building we're in right now is in stage 7. It happens all the time. The only time you're not in stage 7 is when you're undertaking one of the other parts of stages 2 through to 6. But stage 7 is buildings in use, hence the name. Stages 0 and 1 exist in that very smallest element right at the top. So one of the things, and you'll see many versions of this, is the whole idea that the lowest cost item, and we'll show how this affects things, has the greatest level of profound value. Because what I'm going to demonstrate to you, and what hopefully you know already, is the sheer impact that briefing has on this part. I will argue to you as well that things like design and construction are dead easy. They're not difficult. And we have an industry that's very good at doing them. It's whether they're doing things that are relevant that deliver this. One way of looking at that, and it has for a while, a good colleague of mine, Richard Saxton, you may have seen a diagram of this before or seen lectures on it. He put it across in a document called Be Valuable. But when he was defining what we might mean by value in the built environment, and he simply defined it as what you get over what you give. Now, I've looked at that, and I've taken it somewhere else, and bracketed together that as basically being the value in the answer that is delivered. Well, what's become apparent to me, and what is relevant, particularly in stage 0, is if you like, the quality or the value, if you like, that resides in the ratio between a question and an answer. So here's some very straightforward quotes and statements, but the quality of your answers is in direct proportion to the quality of your questions. This may seem slightly odd, but actually it rings true. We as an industry are crap at asking the right questions, or even knowing if the right questions have been asked. You know, my professional body seems to be transfixed on the greatest accolade being the Sterling Prize. That's just like cake decorating. It's not relevant, really, in the bigger scheme, because we aren't asking the right questions. So the argument being that, you know, it is the quality of the question that will determine ultimately the quality of the answer, however good your answering abilities are. Looking at that, reiterate that point, but looking at that in a bit more detail, here's the plan of work. Hopefully you have known this, hopefully this is not the first time you've seen this, but what I'm saying is that strategic definition is the question. It is where the question is posted. It's how you say, what is it? What is the thing to the answer? As you move into stage 1, that's when you start to look at how you might answer it. Not what the question is. You should not move into stage 1 until you know what the question is. It's then, how am I best going to answer it? Then when you move into the bit that most people get excited about, it's all about the answering of the question. And that is all stages 2, 3, 4, 5, and indeed, it's not until you get to 6 that you reach the answer. The answer, in most instances, if we're going through a design and construction period, being a building. That's the answer. However, it isn't until we reach stage 7 that the quality of both the answer and the question that started that process is known. So, you know, it's also the basis for new questions going forward. If any of these concepts don't make sense, you want to just dive in at some point. But what I'm saying in this area as we look at stage 7 now is it's the true measure of the quality of the question and how well it was answered. So, space we're in. Many many ways of saying how well is this. Was this ever purposely designed as a lecture hall? Yes, it probably was. How well does it work in that way? How does it work in other kind of methods and functions? But I think rather than maybe using this room, I'll use another example of, first of all, what we mean by in use. The diagram, you'll find that these diagrams do exist. They will be lifted from this book. And this is trying to look at building in use from a systems view, based on, in this case, a patient. So this is a systems view of a healthcare solution. The thing that you might think of as in a hospital only exists in this layer. But it's an integral part, if done correctly, with the patient, the nurse, the department in which the nurse works, then the infrastructure, the physical architecture, the building physics, but then the bigger health system that that's part of. And all of this is subject to external pressures and forces that operate at the level of the individual to a whole societal level. From the parts that make it up to the wholes that act as a complete system, to the needs that need to be answered and addressed, to the means by which you might do it. So it's actually looking at a complete thing, building in use. Shock horror, building the people in it. Indeed. How many architectural photographs do we see with people not in the building because they might ruin it? How many times do you hear, oh, the building would work really better if the users knew how to use it? Really? Who got that wrong? The users, or was it the building and the people who put the building together? Not understanding the question and providing an answer hence that was wrong. Another view, looking at stage 7, is looking at sustainability in a much bigger way. Now, we hear a lot about this part of sustainability. We hear a lot about energy performance, green materials, and various other things. But at best, they probably exist in this part of the diagram. So, what environmental factors versus the cost of those factors are viable. But when we're really looking at a building in use, we need to consider the social aspects. And indeed, the social, what is bearable. So we could probably run this room a lot cheaper if we turned all the lights off. That would mean I wouldn't know if you were here or not. You might fall asleep. If it wasn't air conditioned, if it is, if it wasn't, the temperature wasn't controlled or various other things, it might not be bearable. But it might balance this one very well, and it might not use much in the way of resource. But we need to understand all of this. Equally, if we were using energy from, I don't know, chopping down all the trees in Greenwich Park, because it's wood, it's fine, it's great, but would that be a really equitable way to do it? So, stage 7 presents this version of holistic sustainability, all aspects of the system and how they interact. Okay, you'll see a lot of words to this effect, but stage 7 is, it says here, beginning is the end. So, that's where you want to be. That is stage 7. The blue is stage 7. To get to it, you're following this other process around. To get there, or to understand how well you're getting there, the only way to achieve it is through feedback. If you wait for that feedback to when you got to this point, there's little you can do to change it. So there are, I'd say, two levels of feedback. There is what was done and how well did it work, as well as what is being proposed and how well will it work. So this will be feedback at each key stage, but from the point you want to get to. So again, this very often doesn't happen. We don't see it occurring at key fundamental stages of design, certainly of construction, where it's only the immediacy where that decision is being made there. It doesn't necessarily, what impact will this have on the final outcome? What will this manifest once the building is in use? You will have heard this word, I'm sure, performance gap. Lots of people say this, buildings have got performance gaps. If you've not heard it, what it is a phrase around the fact that a building might have been given, you've heard of BREEAM, yeah? Given a BREEAM score of excellent. In use, it pissing energy everywhere. You know, people are really unhappy with it and all the rest of it. It was, oh, well, there was a big performance gap. Well, I would argue a different way to look at that isn't a performance gap, it's a prediction gap. Because actually what happened throughout the process, no one deliberately said, this building's not going to perform very well, because apparently everything it went through suggested it was going to perform extremely well. So something went wrong in that prediction way. Something went wrong that said, oh, actually, we're doing this, and we don't, you know, it's going to result in this as an outcome. But that often, so often, isn't thought through, because people often want it. They don't want to look beyond the task they're doing. Why would a builder, why would a constructor be interested in what the client was asking for in the first place, or what the end users might want? Indeed, why would a designer, an architect or whatever, really be concerned with what's going to happen on site at a particular day, or indeed what's going to happen after the building has been in use for, say, 20 years? At the moment, there is little. That is changing, and that's part of the reason this has been brought into the plan of work. Equally, there's no denying that we are now, call it the age of information, call it what you will. You're all using some of this stuff already. This is already impacting our lives. I'm not going to dwell on any detail here, but you all have heard of the Internet of Things. If you haven't, it's going to have a profound effect on every one of your careers, whether you stay in construction or the built environment or not. Sensors as a key part of that, the fact that we are learning more and more and more about how things happen, and in real time with phenomenal amounts of data, which leads us to the arena of big data, which in this instance is simply defined as of data that's of a huge volume, of huge velocity, so it's coming in all the time, and a massive variety. So it isn't a defined set of data, it's a vast amount of data flooding in. Now, all of these things are going to, over time, we're starting to see early signs of it now, give us much, much more insight into how buildings are actually working. Why that matters? Because with that information, there is no reason that we cannot improve the prediction and stop repeating the same errors, the same mistakes. These mistakes matter because if we were to sort of start to try and draw the roundel more realistically, and even this is nowhere near it, stage 7 is by far and away the largest part of any building project. How long have these buildings been here? You know, compared to how long it took to originally design and do various other things, it's profound. Yeah, it could be huge. It's likely to be even on the shortest lived building, 5 years, 10 years maybe. Most likely, it's going to be of the order of 50 years or more. And that is actually what you are providing. That is actually what you're creating. Not this point where, you know, oh, there's a great building, where's the next one I'm going to do? You know, that's the point at which things start, not the point at which they end. So, it's important, I think, this one to us to see that point of transition. We're following the process round in that point. Have you heard of soft landings? No? Yes? Yep. Yeah, so you've heard of that. It's an initiative that isn't exclusive to BizRIA, but BizRIA heavily support and promote it. And it is a process predominantly deals with the energy aspects of the building, not exclusively, but predominantly with the energy aspects. And you know, it kicks in at this transition point between 6, the handover, and into 7. It does start earlier, and we'll come on to that in a bit. At the moment, we are looking at its role within 7. But one of the important things is really, soft landings only creeps very slightly into stage 7. So again, this is one of the things that confuses. Soft landings, period, post-occupation is 1 to 3 years, typically. So it's hardly any time at all. It's a little bit of refinement, really. It's a little bit of tweaking and polishing the building, but it's not there for the lifetime of the building. Stage 7 and everything to do with it is. So, this, going back to the analogy on questions again, is if you like, where that question gets answered. At this point, where soft landings comes in, where you go from stage 6 handover, so the building is handed over to the client. So all the commissioning stuff, all the as-built information, all the other information is all done in here, and it's put into here, and it becomes live. People start doing whatever they're going to do. It's a hospital, they start using it as a hospital. It's a school. It's a home, someone starts living in it. It's a school, people start learning it. Whatever it is. Whatever it is. And that's when you start to really find out, did we ask the right questions? If we did, how well did we answer them? But more and more we're hoping that will change, but historically, people walk away at that point. You know, most architects, particularly, won't go back and visit a building again. They don't want to find out how bad they would be. They want to find out where's the next commission, where are they going to go next. This is trying to change that, and there's a very good reason, a strong reason why we're trying to change this. This is the closest I will get to that horrible thing called BIM. Why the industry is so excited about using computers, I really don't. I'm a hugely, massive digital fan, but it isn't going to change anything. Especially if you grasp the bit I'm saying, because all BIM is about is answering the question better. It's not about posing a better question, apart from the potential of this. I will again use horrible acronyms, but who here has heard of PAS 1192? Hey! Yeah? And those of you that aren't willing to raise your hands. Public Accessible Standard 1192, it is the standard for data in the built environment, and interestingly, fits very well at that transition point, 6 going into 7, and 7 then informing projects going forward. And it's where we'll come into this concept of feed forward in a moment. Feedback, so stage output, stage 6, informs the first cut of a PAS 1192 into, this is the PAS model, I'm not going to talk you through that. But then, plain language employers' questions, what is being asked, will inform stage 0. So some of that stuff is already there, embedded, if you like, in a government standard for data. So it's already, known. How well the industry picks up and runs with that, we will see. Some kind of, where am I overview of some of the key objectives and issues that happen in stage 7. It is impossible, and it is also not correct, to try and define all of them, for the simple fact that stage 7 is going to likely occur over tens of years. But it is very important to put across some of the sorts of stuff that certainly should happen. And they are, and we'll touch on some of the aspects of this, facilities management. Now, sure, you've heard a lot about facilities management. It is often, and I've got a slide specifically on, mistakenly thought of them that look after the heating, or change the light bulbs, or clean the carpets. Yeah, that's part of it, but actually true FM is so much more, and should be so much more. Post-occupancy evaluation, POE. Anybody heard of that? No? It's a way, as the word suggests, of basically evaluating a building once it's in occupation. A variety of ways associated you can achieve that. Building performance evaluation, similar. To me, it's a subset of post-occupancy evaluation that really is looking at how well that building is performing against the criteria by which it was first created. It's also, and I'm not going to go into any detail, I'll go into detail on some of those in a bit, but other issues to do with earlier stages and other aspects of the project are planning implications can come to bear during stage 7. Now, here's an example that I'll give to you. Who here has been to the Sky Garden and the walkie-talkie? Some of you, yeah?
What?
Walkie-talkie? Big tall building? Yeah. Sky Garden, thing at the top? No? You probably need to go further along the river then, from Greenwich. Go west. Massive building. Anyway, Wonderful idea, the idea of creating a building that actually at rooftop level has about double the area as it does on the ground. They want permission to do this building on the basis that they would create a public space at the top of the building. That was a key part of the planning permission they received. It has been deemed by Westminster Council, I think it's Westminster or Camden, that actually they've not done that as well as they should. And they are now apparently going to be obliged to remodel the whole top floor at huge expense. That planning information wasn't understood or even found out until the building was in use, until it was too late. So stage 7, there are things to do. There could be energy factors and other things. Procurement and contract things, there aren't any really defined for stage 7 at this moment in time. Contracts will typically end at practical completion, at handover.
Effects liability.
To an extent, but that's only limited for a while, and that's not quite the same. That's more tied up with the, if you like, the fabric of the building. No one's going to come back on a defects liability, and I remember when I was a student, like you guys are, that I was, told how bad the idea of collateral warranties and such like were. Fitness for purpose. But actually now we're very much in that arena. At the moment, like David would be if someone came back and said, do you know what, educational standards of the kids are falling as a result of this school design. But that's where we could find ourselves. And possibly rightly so. As I said, let's look at some of the others. So, a little boring slide with small text. But here is a summary of some of the things that FM should include. Space management, strategic organisational planning. So how a whole organisation is actually planned. How this very college, how this very university works and operates as an organisation. How you are managed as a group of students. How teaching staff are organised, how other aspects. All of that sits within the arena of FM. Asset management. So that's asset as the building, but other stuff that might exist within the building. Projection equipment, other stuff. Real estate portfolio management. Whoa, nasty word, but what is the value of this estate? Is it still worth keeping, or could the same thing be delivered better and could this be realised somewhere else? Lease administration, if that's appropriate, buildings being leased. Move management. What happens if University of Cambridge decides to move itself somewhere else? That would be an FM function. And then we involve more than one building, in fact more than one site. Project management, in every sense of the word. And preventative maintenance. So look, at the bottom of the list here is the stuff to do with changing light bulbs, cleaning the carpet and all the rest of it. Which most people think FM is about, unfortunately. And unfortunately, so do many people in FM. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of people that would be happier wearing a boiler suit but are now forced to wear a suit. And all they want to do is go and change the light bulbs. So there is massive opportunity in this arena to bring a level of intellect that maybe doesn't exist there currently. BPE, Building Performance Evaluation, POE, post-occupancy evaluation. Some of the ways you do that, and I think there were elements of this possibly being talked about to an extent when I came in. But, again, looking at what is going on in that building, using focus groups, using particular groups of people that may have an opinion on what's happening in the operation, etc., within that building. Monitoring of an organisation, and that's quite an interesting concept. Not monitoring the building, but monitoring the organisation, the people. Now, certainly as we move into the arena of smart buildings, and I lecture quite a lot and talk quite a lot on smart buildings as well, the fact that a building could actually learn about its occupants better and make suggestions. What if you could tweet your building? I'm uncomfortable. What if that building learn about the potential is huge. Observations of use, tracking success and failure, if indeed you probably know what they look like. Again, you can only do that if you would actually ask the right question. Or questions in the right place to know if you had been successful or had failed. And managing evolution and change. Every building, almost every building, will go through some kind of a change. It will not remain in its original form or function throughout its lifetime. How you go about managing that is critical. Understanding how well the organisation fits in the physical space it's got gives you an indication of the suitability of that space, over and beyond many other factors. Right. Some of the methodologies, these are boring because they have acronyms, but you will know some of these. If not, look some of them up. I can, by the way, give a PDF if this is that's useful or something. Soft landings we spoke about, certainly look at it. It deals with the M&E system mainly in the building, which is why Bisria are so strongly behind it. But the logic behind it pans out across every aspect of the building. BUS, Building Usability Studies. It's a specific form developed by Arup of understanding how well a building is in use. It's a way of measuring stuff, if you like. There are a whole host of specific building performance evaluation energy tools. There are technical memorandums published by an organisation called SIBSI. Got any engineers in the room? One, yes, you know about that kind of stuff. Although you're ICE engineer, aren't you? It's different sort of engineer. But, you know, believe you me, you won't bore him. But to some, that's it's vitally relevant to the bigger picture. DQI, Design Quality Indicators, they still exist. There was a big hype about them at one point, but they still exist as a tool, and they're also very useful as a tool throughout the process. They're very useful as a briefing tool, very useful to evaluate a building. KPIs, Key Performance Indicators, can be used if you can set them up. If you've asked the question really well, you have the basis for KPIs you can constantly review against. Are we continuing to answer these questions well? BREEAM we mentioned, you said you've heard of BREEAM. LEED, kind of like its American equivalent in a way, but there are still projects that are using this and are likely to use this in the future going forward. So, conscious of time, stage 7 into 0, going the other way. So we've come this way in the process. We're now saying we're going to start a new process. And we're going to move in from stage 7 into stage 0. Now, somebody may say, well, how does that work? Because maybe it's a new building. We don't have a stage 0. Well, that's very, very pertinent. So, stage 0, developing quality questions. Why it matters? Well, we've touched on this, but I think let's try to visually represent this. The value of what is done in stage 0 here will only really be realised here in use. Now what these diagrams are trying to show, and I must admit I don't think they're the best, but the difference between the value gained and the value lost. So don't do stage 0 very well, and it's not uncommon to not actually do it at all. And the project will tend to start really quite well, but then will be hit by any number of pressures. As someone goes, oh yeah, but you didn't tell us about that, it was a bit late. The reason they weren't ever told about it is they weren't even involved in the process up here. They weren't engaged with it. Net result being that you end up with typically a huge amount of loss. They've implemented a nice BIM system in here, so they've built it really precisely. They've built it to cost and to budget and all the rest of it. But actually, it wasn't the building that was wanted, because no one even stopped to ask that question. It was just assumed. Other way around, you can actually manage that whole process, build value, and continue to deliver value at an organisational level throughout the life of the building. Now, as you notice, there's all sort of that kind of play on the words, but this time, the end is the beginning. And we have another concept here, feed forward. Everybody's heard the word feedback, but feed forward is not so commonly used. Feed forward is the kind of future-gazing scenario. So if we're trying to inform a stage 0 activity, the basis on which we can do that is to say, what was done and how well did it work? So on a repeat client, that makes a lot of sense. They're doing another building, or they're doing something to one of their buildings, so they have a basis of what was done and how well it works. There's a basis to review. What did we learn? What are we learning from that building as it happens, as it works, day in, day out? But more interestingly and more relevant, possibly, is what do we know and how does that apply to a new or different context? So what can we learn from other buildings that might be similar, or other buildings that might not be similar but might have other factors the same? This is one of the interesting things about the idea of creating, say, a standardised design that works really well in one location, and then you plonk it somewhere else and it doesn't seem to work so well. That's because other parts of that process have changed. It might be a different demographic in the case of a school. It could be a fundamentally different demographic that are using it, and it doesn't suit the teaching and learning styles in place. This is where we need to be smart about how we interrogate information about how well a building is working and apply it to a new set of problems and phrase new questions as a result. Equally, we are moving very much into a very exciting arena of what we don't know. This is where those of you that are interested in any things that may have been considered science fiction is now becoming reality. Again, in the world of the Internet of Things, sensors and big data, and the amount of information we can find out about a building, we can start to not predetermine ourselves what we're looking for. You know, we can start to, for here, for instance, we can measure a temperature, we can measure humidity, we can measure other things and say, well, these people are comfortable because